Let's just start by maybe picking a hero frame from each shot.
Okay.
So, what's the significant action here? Is it
It's him
pulling out?
rolling. No, yeah.
That's kind of a cool
Okay, yeah, let's
frame.
do that.
But do you want it more? Is it more this bit
No,
or?
because I think the next one will be him rolling, right?
Okay, all right. So, oh, you want this close-up moment, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Should we? Do we? Is there a moment where it's sharper? Can you tell me if you see something that this is pretty good, where his hands are sharp there?
Yeah.
Sharpish.
Sharpish. Wait, nothing's in focus in this one, right?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm trying to find. I mean, it's not really super important that everything be in focus, but it's
Right,
just
right.
it's just a representative frame. I'm putting markers on
Okay.
frames that I think are interesting.
Okay.
All right.
Here. Oh, that's that. Yeah. Towards the end.
Yeah, interesting. Look how much this is interesting. All right, so I can see already why you're having trouble with this shot because look how much the color changes. Like as I don't, maybe you're messing around with exposure there, but like
No, it's him standing in front of the
yeah.
light source.
So you have some probably some lights on in the room
Uh-huh.
that are tungsten balanced, and then you have light coming in through the window that's daylight balanced.
Uh, I don't know. I was not in the room. It seems like it was just one large, giant light
Oh, you
source.
didn't shoot this?
I didn't shoot this.
Oh,
It's
okay.
it's a photographer. He shot it with the same camera that he took pictures with.
Yeah. Okay.
If I was there, I would have kind of.
So you don't know what but I mean, what we're seeing here is we're seeing this cool light.
Yeah. It
Oh.
seems like a giant window from the outside. The same one that the chef stood in front of in the previous shot.
I'm also I'm a little concerned about something here though. Hold on, let's just make sure that we're not getting into some problematic here. Yeah, I mean, okay. Hopefully he had it on auto, or he had it on manual white balance, because boy, does it look, I mean, look at how much that color changes.
Mm.
That's just a tricky, I mean, to get that feeling even, it's going to be
Uh-huh.
hard.
But I'm also only doing like a shot of it. Just.
Yeah, okay, just a moment in time. All right,
Yeah,
I'm going to actually grab this
okay.
frame instead because it's got a hand in it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and then this is the one we're matching to,
Yeah.
or we're going to match.
Yep.
Okay, so, and then last, here's a completely separate shot, just,
Yeah. How do we match?
is that boiling water? Is that how
That
they
is
cook
boiling
the,
water.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, so,
Something with the tortellini in there. A frame with the tortellini.
oh, are they
floating.
throwing the tortellinis in the,
Yeah.
oh, there we go. Okay, yeah, nice. Okay, perfect. Okay, so, oops, I didn't mean to do that. So I'll put a marker on this shot as well. All right, so the reason that I threw those markers on there is that I am going to actually run a script on this to build a reference comp. So we have 5 shots. I'm just going to select them all and run this script here called make thumbnail comp. And so our main comp was called CC, and now we have a comp called CC thumbnails. So the idea here is that we now have a point of reference. We can see all the shots together at once, so we can bounce back and forth
okay.
between. So this is, you know, we'll go to this when we start wanting to try to match things together.
Okay.
So this this has a couple options like, oops, I guess auto tiles is turned on. So we'll just do 4 up for now, and you can see all the shots. The good news is they all kind of match, you know. So we're not like in, you know, it's not going to be a huge issue to get them all to look good. But let's bring in your reference images as well. So was this this is like the pasta vibe reference?
No, there is a shot of him rolling.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. Okay, great. Okay, so the issue is that your video footage doesn't match the color love of this still. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do here is make that ref then only for this shot.
Well, this in the next shot. The next shot is actually...
Great, okay, cool. So now that I have these markers, I can use J and K to bounce between them. So
Okay.
J, K, J, J, or K, 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 J, J, J. Okay, so is that pretty much a good starting place? Should we just dive in on this one? Okay, great. Okay, so here we are, and I'm just going to pop Colorista 2 onto the video footage. So I'll tell you right off the bat what I think I see in terms of, first of all, obviously the photographer is very willing to let the white background just completely blow out. But the other thing, the nice thing about the still is that it's completely like the color palette is really simple, and the skin tones of the guy are really clean too. Just to show you what I'm talking about, I'm going to put the Colorista effect onto the still, and go down to options here, and we have this little overlay you can turn on that helps you see skin tones, and you'll notice this photographer is pretty good in Lightroom or Aperture or whatever he used, because he probably, without even having a measuring tool like this, just made the skin tones correct, and so the grid is showing up. Now, for whatever reason, I don't understand why this is so complicated, because these were made with the same camera on the same day, right? So, but look at his skin tones here. If I turn the grid on, they're a lot pinker, and so you've got the grid showing up on his shirt, but not on his arm.
Right.
So that's kind of, I mean, just because my bias as a colorist, like I tend to look first to the skin tones, you know. But I'd also just say that overall, this shot just appears to be, the reference shot I think is pleasing because it's so much warmer, you know.
Right.
So easiest way to do that, and we'll just leave that skin grid on there, and we'll turn it off when we're done. So the easiest way to just adjust that is we'll go into the primary. How familiar are you with Colorista in terms of like?
I've never used it.
Okay.
Never seen it before.
So it's 3 color correctors in one. There's primary, which is first, secondary, which is second, and master, which is third. And actually, well, usually when we think about like giving the image an overall kind of a look, we actually start with master. And when we think about balancing the image out and just getting it to be kind of technically correct, we do primary.
Okay.
So let's just start though with master, because one thing that I just know right off the bat, it does look like this guy shot with a nice flat setup on the 7D. So the 5D, okay. So a big step right away would just be to do some contrast, and I'm doing that in master because I like to do it with this soft curve. So the other thing is that if we're going to not be afraid of blowing out, there's a couple things we want to do, right? First of all, we don't like this blue tinge, right? Second of all, we don't mind blowing out, but we want like a nice smooth transition between what's blown out and what's not. Like, see how soft that is,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, nothing rubbery.
Well, nothing like this. What happens when in video when stuff gets blown out is that the color channels blow out. First of all, they blow out really hard. They hit a wall, you know? Second of all, they blow out, like, let's go through the color channels. So this is red, this is green, and this is blue. So notice that the area of blown out detail here in blue is huge. Notice that the area of blown out detail here in green is smaller, and then notice that it's almost not blown out in red. And that is why this color of like this sort of bluish color changes into cyan towards the end. If you were to just do something really simple like make a solid that was like a pleasing sort of a sky blue, like this, and then blow it out in exposure like this. See how it turns cyan?
Yeah.
Why does it turn cyan?
That's just what happens to blue?
No, because a very specific reason. Because first the blue channel is blowing out and it stops. And then green comes to catch up. So blue can only get so bright, and then green has to start getting bright. And then it'll eventually turn white when red catches up, because there's a little bit of red in that color too. But when blue has to hit the top and stop, then all you can do is add more green. And so as cyan blows out, it turns, or as blue blows out, it turns cyan. And unfortunately, as skin blows out, it turns yellow. So we're going to have to watch for both of those things as we get this sort of overexposed background kind of look. So, okay, so we've got a little bit of our contrast dialed in. I'm just going to lift the mids. Now, part of the reason that I'm doing this, lifting the mids and now the highlights, I'm actually designing this curve to have a softer approach into white to hopefully take care of some of that problem I was just talking about. So let's just go and look at that blue highlight there. I'm going to turn the Colorista off. So now see how colorful and saturated this blue highlight area is? I turn it on. See how some of the saturation has pulled out of that? So that is because this curve is a contrast curve. And the steeper the curve, the more the contrast, right? But you'll notice that the contrasty area is all in the midtones. The curve is actually shallower than the baseline up top, so that means lower saturation in highlights, higher saturation in midtones and shadows, and that's actually awesome. So this curve is just a good starting place for probably all of our shots, and in fact we will use this as a basis for every single one of the shots that we do, is this curve. We'll probably be copying and pasting settings from one shot to the next, but just in case, we can also do this. You can save this as an animation preset. So I like to just put a CII in them to make sure that they're easily searchable, and we'll just call this food curve. And now I have II already searched for over here, so after it beach balls for a second while it saves that, it knows after you save them to reload the list, which takes long enough that it makes you wonder. Alright, so now food curve is just a preset that I can drag and apply to subsequent shots. Alright. That way they'll all have the same curve, which will hopefully help us with some consistency. Alright, so going into primary then, I'm just going to warm up the highlights. That's going to be a big step towards getting us into our look. And as I'm doing it, I'm actually watching his arm, you know. I'm really, you know, if I do it too much towards green, obviously it's not good. If I do it too much towards red, obviously it gets magenta-y. Nobody likes magenta. So there's just kind of this sweet spot in between. And luckily the grid helps us get there. And also, luckily for us, a warm tone that is pleasing for people is also pleasing for food. I'm not sure exactly what that says about, like, do we want to eat people or whatever, but it works out nicely that way. And as you'll see, you know, the temptation is to go and push it farther out and get warmer and warmer and warmer. But what happens is that the whole scene becomes conspicuously warm, and that's obviously not what we want either. But let's push it a little warmer than we think we might, because there's a philosophy of color correction that I call push-pull, and that is, right now our image appears kind of monochromatically yellow, and we don't want that. There is still a little bit of cool tone in this reference image, and there, in particular in his outfit, you know, if you look at if you inspect the numbers on it, you know, it's barely warm, but it's pretty neutral. So when I say, so I'm looking at like this color swatch up here. So as I hover over him, you kind of see it's actually sometimes easier just to look at this little swatch.
Yeah.
Because it's quite clear, like hovering over the shirt, it's quite clear that that swatch is pink, you know, and it's quite clear that the swatch here is pretty much a warmish gray, you know. So I want to get his shirt that warmish gray, but I do want to, I'm okay with making these highlights a little bit warm. So I am going to push and pull. In other words, as I push highlights to warm, I'm going to pull the midtones back to cool in exactly the opposite direction. And now,
can you show the before and after again?
Yeah.
With the midtone.
So here is, I'll just reset the midtone. Okay. And now I'm just going to slowly pull it in. So reset the midtone.
I see.
Slowly pull it in. So now check this out. I can actually pull the midtone a little farther than I would and really make his outfit even cooler. But now I can actually go in and push the highlights more. You know, this is the push-pull. You might have to go back and forth on this a couple times, you know. So, and maybe we push it a little too far, so I'm going to back off. Okay. Now, there's another trick that we can do here. Let's see if we get. I think we actually got far enough. It's interesting. Why are we having so much trouble with your arm there? I don't want you to turn green. Okay.
So the arm is not likely to turn green as long as grids are solid?
The grid is basically telling you that the arm is like the correct skin tone according to, you know, kind of years of tradition of how these things are done. Doesn't mean we have to believe it. We really should be basing it on our eye, but it's nice to sometimes this stuff gets like smelling perfume after a while, so it's kind of nice to have a little point of reference that is measured as opposed to eyeballed. All right, so the other thing here, I notice this all the time with 5D stuff. For whatever reason, the video stuff is just always a little magenta. So I'm reserving the right at this point now because I've got the shirt kind of looking okay. I'm going to dive into these dots down here, the primary HSL controls, and I'm going to do a little more.
What's HSL?
Hue, saturation, and lightness or luminance.
Okay.
So each of these dots is a color that we can push or pull on this wheel in the direction that we want it to go. So if we want orange to look more red, we can push the orange dot towards red. If we want orange to look more yellow, we can push it toward yellow. If we want orange to look more gray, we push it towards the middle where it's gray. If we want orange to be darker, we can push it toward the middle of this dot. And you can also pull it away. So people, luckily, are orange. So it just so happens that this dot, if you pull it out, for instance, the orange colors get more saturated. If you pull it in, they get less saturated. And if you leave it alone but just nudge it toward yellow a little bit, you can get his arm back on the grid without affecting any other color. Although it did, well, yeah, it had the effect of making this stuff look a little yellower, which is actually okay. So we can boost up the saturation of skin tones without causing a big, without touching any other colors. The other thing we can do is we can identify that this cyanish color, this bluish color, is just like not a color that we want ever to be in the shot, and we can just kind of suck it out. So you see how as I move these dots toward gray, all those funky highlight colors actually go away. And in fact, I like that enough that I'm going to actually leave this alone, do only those adjustments in primary, and go down to master and redo what we were doing before, because I think that if I do this warming stuff on top of those adjustments, that actually it's going to be a little bit better.
The highlight is wider.
Yeah, we're not pushing it quite as far as we were before because the image is balanced out. All right, so let's do a quick sanity check here. So here was our before, and here's our after. How are you feeling about that in terms of how well that matches our guy there?
It still feels like in the reference photo, the highlights are just a little bit less orange.
Let's see here.
I guess just how it reflects back to his apron.
Yeah, I think let's look
But
at some more frames because
because it might be the
yeah, I mean he's got yellow bounce light hitting him
right.
from that,
That is true.
and it might be a mistake to cut that out. You know,
Okay.
you don't. I mean, it might not. You never know. I mean, if it troubles you, then yeah, obviously you want to get rid of it. But you don't necessarily want to like
Right.
chase little details like that because they can become really vexing and you can wind up kind of stomping on the image a little bit.
Then otherwise, yeah. Can we see how that shot plays out?
Yeah. So let's. So we're just kind of concerned with this little bit here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll just preview that much of it, and I'm gonna turn off the grid for that part.
Can we watch the video with the reference photo?
Oh yeah, totally.
Okay, I see where the yellow.
Yeah, so you see the yellow really varies a lot, you know. And let's just say, just for the sake of argument, that we knew for a fact that this was the only part of the shot that we were going to use. You could, just for this one little piece of the shot, I mean, this, if you wanted to do it for a longer chunk of the shot, it would start to get a little trickier because this gets into so primary we talked about is for balancing things out. We used primary really to do these saturation and hue adjustments. So we pulled the blue out of the highlights and we adjusted his skin tones. We made them a little richer and a little yellower to offset the 5D's tendency to produce kind of magenta-ish skin tones. We used master to do the kind of color look of the warm highlights and the slightly cooler shadows to try to neutralize his outfit and make the scene feel pleasingly warm. And we also use master to design the curve. So what's left? Well, what's left is secondary, and secondary is kind of for fixing stuff. And we have a couple of things that we can do in secondary. One of them is that we can do a key. So I could literally go onto his belly here and try to get just the parts of the light that is that kind of yellowish bounce. So I'm literally just grabbing this color that is this sort of yellow bounce. And you know what? It's not that bad. Like I was expecting it to get other colors, so that's actually not bad if I just soften that up and go out. I might just be able to pull some saturation out of that. All right, so let's turn that on and off. So here's me bypassing secondary. So there's his yellow belly, and here's me turning it back on. So if you wanted to go for the super clean look, I would actually feel pretty comfortable. You got to check this in motion always because you don't want to be pulling any yellow out of the delicious looking dough, you know. And so let's just double check that. Let's bypass. You know, it looks like we really nailed it. If we thought there was a chance that the dough was going to get affected by this, which we really don't want, right? Because it's all about the food. Then what we would do is we would use this mask here to just control where the key is going to affect. So this is just a soft edge mask. So inside the mask, the key is doing the secondary is working. So if I pull this off, you see yellow belly is back. I pull it on and it's fixed. So I can literally just float this mask and let's just check it on a few frames. So what I would do is I'd go to like my in frame here and I would set a keyframe for the center point and literally just kind of like do the world's roughest sort of animation to just keep this centered on his belly. And let's just see how that's going. So here's a frame where we could add a new keyframe. And we don't have to be super precise about this. We're just trying to protect the dough. And this key has a soft, or the key is soft, and the mat is soft. You know, so we're never going to get ourselves in too much trouble here. Okay. So now I feel like we got something pretty cool here.
Okay, so secondary is mostly for isolation of the little problems.
That's literally what the term has come to mean in color correction. Is that it is something that you sometimes you hear people call it qualify, which just means like I'm only correcting this color or whatever, you know. I mean, you literally use it to do silly things like change the color of someone's shirt, but for the most part you're doing things like this where it's a really good use of it to actually control bounce light off of things, because people don't realize that someone wearing a green sweater, like a fluorescent green sweater, is going to have a green chin, you know. And so we use secondaries all the time just to take green bounce off of someone's face because they were standing on grass, you know. All right, so let's look at our next shot. And here's the fun part, right? We can start by literally just copying our Colorista and pasting it onto this shot. And what I'll do is I'll just, for the time being, in the new shot, disable the secondary. So I'm just going to bypass it altogether. And we'll see if we wind up needing it. But for the time being, we're going to start off and assume we don't. Now, here's kind of the interesting thing about and let's actually do this too. So I'm going to lock this frame, and I'm going to bring up my thumbnails. That and right next to each other. So fit and oops, fit. So now we can get a nice sort of lay of the land. We'll actually be able to see not just our reference but also our other shots. In fact, we can even do kind of a cool thing here. Go back to CC. I'm going to take the reference shot, and I'm going to actually put it over here, which is going to make it appear as one of those. So, in fact, we can do it over here. There we go. Okay, so now we're trying to get this guy in line with these two, right? Okay, so right off the bat it looks darker, right? Okay, so we could go into master where we did some adjustments, right? And we could actually go in and make ourselves a little more room here.
Bump up the exposure?
Yeah, we've got an exposure control. And that might be perfect, but the other thing we're trying to match is how much background encroachment there is. And actually the background encroachment here is kind of nice. So what I'm probably going to do is not go into master, but go into primary, where we have this totally unused three-way color corrector. And I'm going to actually start by trying to do the midtones. So I'm going to just start lifting midtones. And that actually is giving me a much softer kind of increase. Let's bump the highlights up a little bit. So instead of reaching for exposure, I'm actually reaching for highlights and midtones, because that's giving me a more control over the parts of the image that I'm adjusting, you know.
Okay, so when you bump it up, what are you? When you're bumping up the highlight and midtone in the primary, what are you doing?
It's similar in a way to this curve.
Are you pushing the exposure?
Well, bumping up highlights is the same as bumping up exposure, but bumping up midtones. So here, let's just let's reset these two. So I can just double click on these and reset them. So watch. Let's just make the image a lot brighter by adjusting highlights, right? So two things you'll notice: the image got more contrasty, and the image got more blown out. Okay, but it got brighter. All right. So there's that. Now let's do the same brightness increase by adjusting midtones. And these are extreme adjustments. But now you'll notice that the image got less contrasty, and the highlights, it got a little more blown out because more midtones are pushed near highlights, but it doesn't have a blown out feeling to it, you know? So we'll do that again. So here's exposure. It feels kind of like
swallowed,
overexposed, you know? You do midtones too much, it feels washed out, right? So a little bit of each is often the right thing to do. And sometimes, again, you need to push-pull. Sometimes if you brighten up with midtones a lot, you need to back off with shadows. You need to try to get some contrast back into the image. But for the most part, we're going for kind of a low contrast look here. We've already got a nice contrast effect thanks to the curves. So I think, for the most part, I think we're doing okay. So, but one thing I sure notice about this shot is that since he's leaned down more, and for whatever reason, his outfit feels much more yellowy warm than it has in the other shots. And we'll experiment with a couple different ways of dealing with that. I mean, we could go into master and just try to cool off the mids just a little bit more. It might get away with it. I think that's the right thing to do. Yeah, that feels like the right thing to do. It's still, I know you're looking at the same area I'm looking at, which is his yellow belly. But we've got his sleeves balanced. You know, like this feels very similar to this. So now we'll tackle the belly as a separate issue. And luckily, we have that already kind of worked out. So let's just take a look at the motion of the shot. And again, we'll kind of pick maybe a region that that's a cool frame. I like that. Very, that's a neat looking frame. And it's nice to see something in focus every once in a while. And very, very different, again, we're starting to see some of these problems of like the different kind of lighting that we're...
Yeah, just the subtle emotion. Is it just one source?
Well, I do think that we do have an issue with cooler daylight, and I think we have different color temperatures of light sources, and I think as he's moving around and changing his relationship to the light, I think we're seeing some of that start to happen. So let's just take a look at. Man, that is some precision tortellini engineering right there. All right.
Well, I give certificates real soon, so.
Awesome. Sold. All right, I think we have a consistent kind of flavor of how much bounce we're getting in on this guy here. So, the other thing that might be worth asking ourselves is, do we want the dough to look a little more yellow, you know? Yeah. But maybe it'll look more yellow when he doesn't look so yellow. So let's get back into secondary and see where...
But I am noticing is there a little bit of green or something on that dough?
Well, I think it looks green because it's gray, and it matches the previous shot, but because there's not this this backlit part of it right here, it just, I mean, this does match that, but it just isn't, we're just not seeing the appetizing part of the color, so we might literally try to just fix that. All right, so let's look at the key and see how we were doing with just isolating that belly area. It's not bad, but we can redo it. Yeah, okay. Cool.
What you're doing is you're changing the softness?
No, I'm literally just grabbing different areas of color, and I'm getting a different kind of flavor of key, you know. Right. And we are getting some edges of the dough down here, so we will want to use the mask to just adjust this like this. Okay. Now let's disable the secondary so you can see yellow belly and without yellow belly. And I would say we could even go a little farther than that by just...
But can you explain to me the 3 boxes?
Yeah, so this is for starting a new key. So any color you select, that's the color you're going to grab. So we can grab skin tones, we can grab belly, we can grab white.
And key itself is a verb, meaning taking the thing out.
Yeah, it means selection, basically. Yeah, okay. We're selecting a color to work on, And you see a couple different representations of this. The cube is like gonna show you the range of hues, saturations, and luminances or lightnesses. And then this is an array of colors. You can see on this wheel here, these cooler tones are coming from the outfit, the warmer tones are coming from the dough and from the skin tones. And but you don't ever have to even look at this stuff because you can literally just select the color you want. And then if you want more, you can literally just grab this plus tool and you can just scrub on the area that hasn't been selected yet, like up here, and just scrub on the plus. You can keep doing that until you have a lot, and then if you wanted to try to get rid of some of the dough, you can take the minus tool and you can minus out the dough a little bit. Minus out the arm here a little bit. So you can kind of fight these back and forth, the plus and the minus here, until you have exactly what you want. And this is a subtle effect that we're doing. Like, I mean, you could go crazy with this and just say, you know, you could turn it a color, you know. You can isolate any correction you want into this area. The correction we're doing is just a slight reduction in saturation. So here it is.
So key just selecting, and then you still need another action after that to handle it.
That's correct.
Which is the secondary section.
That's correct. So here it is without our desaturation, and here it is with. So that's real cool, and we can do that same kind of effect. Actually, well, let's see how yellow this really is. Sometimes things aren't as yellow as we think they are, but let's just see if I just increase saturation of yellow, actually that works out really well. You see what I'm doing here? Let's I'll just reset that one dot. So the dough is yellow, and I'm just increasing saturation of yellow.
Luckily, it's the only yellow thing.
Aside
from the little bit of the arm, but
yeah, and I can also push it away from green. If you were worried that it was a little green, I can push it towards orange. So that's the cool thing about this dot. I can pull it out, which makes it more saturated, and I can push it towards orange. You can see it, I can make it like fully orange, or I can actually make the dough green. So making the dough more saturated and making it a little oranger, I think feels like sort of the right thing to do for this shot. All right, so
that's done. That's beautiful.
That's that. Let's celebrate by saving. Okay, so I'm gonna take this next shot and I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna just start fresh with the food curve, which does pull in our grid as well. And let's just see here. So same kind of thing. I'm just gonna warm up the world a little bit. As I'm doing that, I'm watching the table. I'm watching the kind of neutral feeling of balance of everything there.
In the reference, it's actually a little bit greenish for some reason.
Yeah, well, we'll see if we want to, how much we want to hue to that. So is, which one of these is the reference?
Go
Is it?
No, go down. Again. I think the last one? No, that's not it. Let's open that up. I actually can't. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Yeah, this is a little tricky.
But I think in one of the references there was there a hand? There was a person in there, so we can get both the.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so let's look at that. Yeah, you're right. That is a little green. Well, so now we do have a choice that we have to make in terms of how do we want to match the this individual reference, which is a bit greenish, or do we want to match into the rest of our shots?
Right. Since the rest of our shots would be going through pretty similar steps, right, as the previous two shots?
Well, either way, it doesn't really matter. I mean, this is not maybe the best reference in the world for this because the lighting is different, the subject matter, you know, the surface that it's on is different. So my temptation would be to kind of, if you wanted to make the shot green, you could, but I don't see why you would. I would say that this reference is maybe not as good reference as the surrounding shots are, you know.
Okay.
I mean, it'd be very hard to convince me that the right thing to do isn't to try to make this look like our other shots. But it's not to say that your client might not want that. So I'm lifting the midtones in primary. I've got a grid happening on my knuckles here. I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel like this shot doesn't actually require a ton of work. It looks pretty damn good.
Yeah. Okay, so just for learning's sake, can we try to match it with the tougher shots, and assume that there's a bunch of transitional shots in there that.
Yeah, so it's not going to be hard. You're just going to. I mean, we can. I don't know. It's here. Let's duplicate it. It's pretty much just going to be going into master and just making the midtones more of this sort of greeny cyan kind of color.
Okay. That makes a hand really zombie-like.
Well, this is where the skin overlay thing really helps you out, because the truth is it's actually fine. The skin is okay, you know. But yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to fight this, you know. Oops. So there's kind of the. Well, I guess we need to neutralize out those highlights a little bit. Sorry. Yeah, it's tricky because, I mean, we're trying to get a sense of this kind of greener overall tone.
Still maintaining some kind of warmth.
Well, and just, you know, I don't know, what are we trying to turn green? Like, there's no wardrobe in this shot, you know. We can turn the sort of the area of the table that has darker grains in it, where it's a little grayer than warm, you know. But
I see. Okay.
It's a little.
Yeah, I actually like the original approach much better.
Yeah, I honestly, I mean, sometimes, you know, you can get in trouble by doing what someone asks for instead of by doing what it's obvious that they really want.
Okay. But it's good to have that just in the back pocket to show the client that that's not what they actually want, right?
Yeah. Oops. That's not what I want to do. Wait a minute, I'm doing the wrong one. That's why. There we go. Okay, so primary. So I am gonna, though, by bouncing back and forth to those, it was clear that I did kind of want to brighten things up a little bit. So I'm gonna. Oops, doing too much with. Yeah, I think actually I want to do it all with mids. Because this look of like this table, let's get rid of that reference for now. This look of having this table be kind of pushed up into the mids is kind of helping it get into the same zone. Although, you know, our table did wind up a little more yellow in this shot.
In the shot that we're doing.
Yeah, the whole shot wound up a little yellow, actually. Let's back that off.
But that's because we're focused entirely on the table, and we didn't have.
Yeah, but this is better. Now it's more neutral, feels balanced.
Okay. Oh, sorry. What did you just do?
I just I just took the highlights in master, and I just backed them away from
Yellow. Okay.
Well, I backed them more towards the middle.
Okay.
So I just backed off of the adjustment. Okay, so there's that. Okay. So now the last. Okay, so this is another tricky one in terms of. I'm going to try to start with what we did here. Not bad. Okay, so let's go down to. So same thing here. I'm just going to. This one wound up a little too yellow, so I'm just going to back off. And you can do that with this little controller here. It's just going to move the dot closer to the center. So it's just literally like a back it off knob, you know? I think it might just be that simple. Just, you know, these are thankfully similar enough. Not that you would believe it, but.
Is the contrast too high? You can barely see the table.
Well, but again, that's part of our look, right?
Right.
So, I mean, that's a purely subjective thing. But yeah, I mean, let's and let's yeah. It's a reasonable question. Let's see how much we want to. Actually, that's pretty interesting. Backing off, like getting.
So because a plate is there and it's so reflexive, that it makes it feel more.
Yeah, but so we're gonna be flirting with this zone of like how blown out we are. The other thing, the plate is a bit blue, so we actually have an opportunity here to try out our primary blue fix again. Just suck the blue out of it. I'll show you what I am doing there, but I'll disable master for just so I'm bypassing master, and now undo that. So there's this sort of bluer color on the plate, and I can just pull that into the middle, and that kind of neutralizes the plate color. So these controls become really helpful too when you have this like different sources of light kind of competing for color temperature like that. Let's turn on, I'm not sure, convinced that our hand is perfect here, so let's do this. I only want to adjust the hue of the skin, so sometimes moving this dot is a little fussy, so I'm going to switch over to numerical control, and I'm just going to grab orange hue and just roll it. The problem with doing it here is that the whole shot is a little orange, so I did green up the shadows a little bit by doing that.
That's weird. So when you increase the orange hue,
yes,
and greens is complementary color, so it also gets affected.
Well, no, it's just that I'm taking reddish oranges and I'm making them more yellow, so that meant that I took yellowish oranges and I made them more green. So believe it or not, I think I'm actually going to resort to my secondary just for the hand on this one. So let's see here. Let's get the. So you can see how similar the hand is to the table, you know, and we can try to fix that. Oops, not that way. But eventually we will have to face the reality that the hand and the table are awfully similar. It's not the end of the world, but softening and then kind of choking the key is actually a good way to deal with that. Okay, so then I can just literally go into only the hand.
Okay, so when you did that selection, there's still little tiny bits of it on the table.
But as long as it's soft, that should be okay.
All right.
So I just made the highlights in the secondary a little more green, and we'll turn off the overlay. All right, and now I think we have a hand that looks, you know, the same from those two shots. Yeah. Okay, so then one last shot, right?
Yeah.
And this one's a complete freeform one.
Yeah.
This is, because it's a completely different environment. Okay, so notice, this is a great example of what we were talking about. Notice the ravioli, notice the plate, notice the color of the plate, the kind of pinkish color, and then see how the highlights are a little yellower. Because if you look at the plate, red is blown out, but green and blue are fine. So the colors on the plate have gotten a little janked because all you have to do is blow out one color channel and you're in trouble, you know. So what I feel like I want to do with this shot is like kind of neutralize and the overall warm cast of it and separate the warm food from the industrial kind of coolness of the kitchen.
Okay.
So let's start with our food curve. And we will keep the grid because the grid, well, I don't know, maybe we won't keep the grid. The grid is probably not so useful in here. Sometimes you might use the grid literally it would seem funny to do it, but you would use the grid to just like get the raviolis, right, you know?
Yeah.
But I don't think we're going to do that in this case. So there's an interesting tool that we'll try out in this shot, see what it does for us. Auto balance. I can literally go into the shot and pick a color that it will say, oh, that's like a gray card, you know?
Yeah.
Now, the temptation would be to do it on the plate because the plate is white. However, the plate is blown out in one channel, and therefore it's an inaccurate measuring tool. If I balance to the plate, see how the whole shot turns purple? That's because I'm getting a bogus idea of what's white. Okay. Because one channel gave up the ghost. But I can go over here. Now, believe it or not, I just made this gray. The whole shot feels really blue, right? But all I did was I just made this gray. And you can see how blue I made everything. This actually might not be a bad place to start. I'll just back off on it, you know? So I'll just back off on the crazy...
the field's fireless neon.
Yeah. So I'm kind of got a semi-neutrally kind of a world here. So this might be as far as we'll go in well, actually, let's not let those highlights be quite so. Yeah, so this might be as far as we go in primary. So this would be just considered kind of normal, like balanced it out, you know. But let's make it pretty. So to make it pretty, I'm going to go down to master. You know, let's do one quick thing. I think this might be fuchsia over here, and let's just make it not. I don't know, is it? Am I getting any of that? No, I'm not. So what color is that over there? It sure looks kind of, oh, it's red. Okay, interesting. So I'm going to just suck the red out of that. There we go. You see what I just did there?
Yeah.
I just tried out various colors because I couldn't trust my eye to tell me what that weird color cast was in there. So already, you know, we've taken it and we've just kind of balanced it out. Okay, so now let's make it pretty. So,
and how did you know that there's not red in the ravioli? Or
well, because I tried it.
Okay.
And I got lucky. So I'm literally going to push this a little farther here. I'm not going for some kind of crazy, you know, industrial look on that steel there, but I am going to take even my shadows and just move them a little bit toward blue. You see, if I drift too far up, the whole shot turns magenta, right? If I drift too far down, the whole shot turns green and starts to look like a Michael Bay movie. So somewhere in between there, though, is like a tasteful, I'm just making steel feel like steel, you know? And then somewhere, same with these midtones, again, just too neutral. If you just kind of cool them off in such a way that like steel feels like steel, highlights are still highlights. You know, it's one thing that's nice about kitchens is that they can be kind of industrial, you know. But what's catching my eye in a weird way is the color saturation, the handles, right? It's just popping a little bit. So I'm actually going to go back to primary and just tone down that blue a little bit there. And you know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to go, for whatever reason, the shot feels a little like it just kind of lacks sort of like I love the bubbly stuff here, but there's a very even kind of light on all this that is kind of bumming me out a little bit. So I'm just going to go into secondary, and I have this control called pop, and I'm just going to increase pop. Let's put pop to 30. So what pop does is it does kind of like a local contrast thing. So it just makes edges a little, it makes the image feel more sharp by just increasing the difference of colors around one another. So here's no pop, and you can almost see it looks almost like there's a diffusion filter, you know. I'll put pop up to 50.
Oh, I see it.
And the image just kind of gets a, you know, zing to it, you know. And it's good to check the image and just make sure that nothing about adding that pop is, it can give you little halos around like things like this handle here or whatever. So I'm actually going to use a mask, just a rectangular mask, to control where the pop is, because I think I really only am interested in the pop down here in the lower part of the shot. So again, see how I'm wiping it off and then wiping it back on. You see that here? It's like no pop, pop, you know. So we'll leave the pop down here just to enhance the kind of bubbly awesomeness of the thing. I'm thinking maybe the steel is looking a little green. So you can grab this dot and move it, or you can grab this outer puck and just move it a little, roll it towards blue. But when I roll it too much towards blue, it gets purple. I really don't like that. I don't want it green. I don't want it purple. It's just like skin tones. I want it the exact opposite. Just kind of want it this grayish kind of cool kind of color, and that's roughly what I got there. This, I think my shadows could be a little greener. But now I've got these silly magenta-y kind of highlights here, so let's maybe get those a little. You'll notice as when I go back to change the highlights to try to get them to be a little warmer, everything changes, right? The whole thing comes along and has to get readjusted. So we're back to the push-pull zone here of like, I changed highlights, now I gotta change everything else. Okay. So before, after.
And the tortellini actually didn't need much help.
No, they look great. You know, they may just be a little saturated, you know, compared to our other shots. So I think that has to do with the fact that they're a little bit close to being blown out. So maybe, in fact, actually, let's go back here. Let's do auto tiles, so we'll see all of our shots together. That's actually helpful, because I think I would go back in now and say, let's make, brighten up the mids a little bit, get it to feel like it fits in there, and there's an interesting kind of pinkish kind of quality to this stuff going on in here, isn't there? Well, so we've already got this mask for pop. Let's use it for something else too. Go into secondary. So pinkish highlights, don't like that. I'm going to move highlights in secondary toward green. Now, I don't want them to be, I don't want the midtones to come along, so I'm going to move the midtones the other way. This is tricky because I don't want to make anything look unappetizing here. But I am consciously kind of making it a little, yeah, like I'm just trying to make it feel like steel, you know. Yeah, that's better to me. So now we can wipe that off. See, so it's sort of pink zone, and then now it's like sort of a greener zone there. Yeah. And actually, I would even maybe brighten this area up down here. Get it to feel. Yeah, that's helping a lot actually.
What did you just do? Did you
So
brighten the highlights?
I'm brightening the highlights of just this lower part of the frame. So now let's just bounce around in time and just see the shot's a little handheldy, and the lighting is changing a little bit, and the raviolis are getting in there. Okay, so the raviolis are falling in here and maybe getting a little blown out because I brightened this area.
Yeah.
Tortellinis, raviolis. Okay, so I've got one last trick up my sleeve here, which is I'm going to do a tortellini key. So I'm literally just going to key their color here.
Yeah.
Just the torts. Just the torts. Just the torts. Okay, so let's see. I don't really care about this stuff up top because that's outside the zone here. I'm just going to soften that up. Now check this out. The key is doing the wrong thing right now. The key is making my color correction for secondary happen only on the tortellinis. That's not what I want. What I want is the power mask, which is this rectangle here, minus the key. So I want to use the key to cut a hole in the power mask. So now, again, I can do just an extreme correction here and say, this is what I'm doing in the power mask zone, and see how the tortellini are protected from it.
Yeah.
So So as the tortellini, so if I just did power mask only, you can see the tortellinis are getting a little bit yellow and blown out. But if I do power mask minus key, you see that the tortellinis stay all delicious and will tumble into the boiling awesomeness. Let's do, oops, why is that like that? Okay. All right, I really like the way that looks.
Awesome.
Cool.
Okay.
So there you go, man.